Well, I'd like to welcome you to Runners of the Woods, which is a new game in the series of Canadian-themed board games that I've made. And we're looking at an online version here. This is on Tabletop Simulator. And this will allow me to indicate for you, for those of you who have purchased the at-home version or the tabletop versions, the old style of tabletop version on your tabletop, so you'll understand how to set the game up. And so here you see a map, and actually in the tabletop version at home, we just use the bottom portion. And this is the 1 through 4 player game, okay? And you'll notice over here, up in the top left, that we've got deck 1 and deck 2. Deck 2 being the second half of the game that includes cards with a value of 5 coin or more. Deck 1 is the one that we will be interacting with at first. Okay, so down here in front of you, you see that we've got a bank of the coins that we can use, and we've also got separated out the Coureur de Bois card and the Canoe Transport cards. And we want to make sure that each player has at least one Coureur de Bois and one Canoe Transport card at the beginning. Because those are essential to the play of the game. And so once everybody has one of those, you can simply take the remainder of those cards and shuffle them into deck 1. Following that, what you want to do is create your table display of community cards. And so we'll head up here to deck 1, and we'll grab 6 cards off the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, okay? And then these are each then placed into the community display, so that you've got a nice series of 6 that are displayed. And of course, at the beginning of every turn, you want to have all 6 cards there. Okay, and then we simply flip them. In fact, I could flip them all together, but I'll just show you how this works. You right-click and hit flip if you're using the online version. And then we've got a nice array of community cards that we can go to. Okay. And of course, we would have shuffled the Coureur de Bois and the canoe cards, the remaining canoe cards, into that deck 1 before doing that. Okay. Following that, every player needs to get 2 more cards, okay, from that deck 1. So ideally they would have a courier, and they would have a canoe, and they would have 2 other cards. So let's say that you were player number 1, you'll get your 2 other cards, and then we'll take 1 of the courier and 1 of the canoe card, and we will flip these over and see what the active hand of player number 1 would be, okay? Let's take a look at each of those so that we have an idea of how these cards work. We've got a pelt card, okay, and so this represents the collection of pelts that you as a trapper would be taking to the trading posts to earn money and victory points. And again, as you read in the rules, you'll find that you can pick up a pelt every time you come to a river junction that has a pelt symbol, as long as there are pelts available in the community display over here. Okay. If you do play an Indian Trader at the same time, and you'll see here's the Indian Trader, this will allow you to pick up a second pelt card because this Indian Trader is an ally of yours, and you'll get more pelts because of that. And then along with that, we've got the Coureur de Bois. It's a nice look at him, looking very fine in his red jerka, and also the Canoe Transport, or the Fur Transport card, okay? And in the case of arriving at one of the trading posts, you'll see over here at Fort Albany, there is a trading post that is yellow because it's connected with the Hudson Bay Company. Over here at the bottom, we've got Fort William, which is red or burgundy because it's connected to the Northwest Company. Over here on the left-hand side on the corner is Jasper House. This is another Northwest Company trading post. And then over here is the Cumberland House, which is another Hudson Bay Company. Okay, so as you travel from turn to turn and river junction to river junction, eventually you're going to make your way back to a trading post where you can conduct a trade. In which case, you would take a set of the Courrier de Bois and the Canoe Transport, and you would put that into your discard pile, showing that you have used them. And then you would take the pelt and you would discard that. Now, if you can actually carry up to 3 pelts per canoe, and so if you've collected 3, then you would take 3, and that would give you extra money and extra victory points. The number of trades that you make, of course, give you money and victory points, as you can read in the rules. Okay, let's talk about moving. So say, for instance, I was the red player and I was starting at Fort Albany. If this was my first turn, I would go upriver then to the next junction, which in this case, as you can see, would be a pelt, or it would indicate that there are pelts available. And so I would look in the community display and I would see that, oh, there is a pelt. Okay, so I'm going to take that into my possession. Okay, and actually that goes right into my community discard, separate from my active hand, and we'll describe that in a second. Okay. Following that, depending on how much money I have, I could look at the community display and see that there are cards that I could purchase. We see here that we've got a priest card. The priest recruits free Indian traders to my discard pile, which I can eventually then pull into my active hand. Okay? He can also remove Indian traders from one of my opponent's active hand into their discard pile. Okay, so that's the attacking feature of the priest. We also have, let's see, we've got a Cree woman. And so during the game, Courrier de Bois has the opportunity to form an alliance. We'll call it an alliance, but historically it would have been a marriage with a Cree woman. And she has no attacking powers, but she does reduce the cost of any of the Indian cards to only 2 coin. Okay, so that's a really powerful alliance to have. So she really opens up the opportunity to develop a strategy around aligning yourself with the Cree Indian population and benefiting from that alliance. Okay, now you notice that to form that alliance, rather than purchase her with money, she requires, or her family requires, 2 pelts and 1 bag of provisions. Okay, so instead of using money to purchase her as your ally or as your wife, you would be putting a pelt and provisions into the community discard pile. Okay, we'll send her back. Okay, so here's a little bit about how your hand works. Okay, so let's say, for instance, that this is my hand here. I'm just going to take a bunch of these cards into my possession. Okay, and there is my hand at the bottom of the screen. And I'm going to get a couple of other things here as well, just so that I've got them to show how this might work. Okay, all right. Now, say that I've got my hand, this is what my hand looks like right now. I've got a courier, and I've got a canoe, and I've got a pelt, actually 2 pelts. If I was headed to a river junction, if I was headed to a trading post, I would be able to do 2 trades once I got to that trading post. So that would be worth 4 victory points. And then if I was trading at Fort Albany, that would also be $4, because that particular trading post begins paying $2 per trade. Okay, so that's kind of a review there. Now, once I've made a map move, and we saw that the red token moved from Fort Albany to this river junction where there are pelts, that would have been my map move. And if you remember, I took a pelt then from the community pile into my hand, or into my discard, I should say. Now I'm working with my active hand. Okay, the active hand is represented down here, And you can never have more than 7 cards in your active hand at the end of a turn. Okay? And what I'm going to show you is then how to interact with cards on the table. So say, for instance, I was attacking. I'm allowed to, after I do a map move, I can do 2 card actions. I'm going to simulate that. So I'm going to take my priest, and I'm going to attack the hands of a hand of an opponent by trying to take Indian traders from him. And that either fails or not. Let's say, for instance, that it does in fact work, which allows me then to put my red block on the second fleur-de-lis, showing that I have 2 victory points. Okay, so that indicates an attack that worked. Secondly, I'm going to do another attack. I'm going to use my Coureur de Bois. I'm going to pull it out of my active hand and into my discard hand. I'm going to attack the hand of another player. Now let's take a look at what his abilities are. And if you look, the red script tells us that this removes a Coureur de Bois from the opponent's hand and into his discard pile. So say, for instance, your opponent was headed back to a trading post to make a trade. You could get in the way of that by removing one of his Coureur de Bois before he gets there. And that would end his trip pretty fast and allow you then to get one more trade ahead of him. Okay, so let's say, for instance, that fails. So that attack fails. He was able to defend against that attack, right? And so there's no more victory points that are added to my total. I leave it on the second fleur-de-lis, and now my turn is over. Okay. Now, say, for instance, I did happen to return to my hand on the next turn, and after I'd done my map move, I wasn't going to make any attacks, but I wanted to bring cards back into my hand. Okay, I go back to my discard pile here, and I want to flip them over, and I want to shuffle them a few times. Okay, and now I have 2 opportunities, 2 card actions, where I can pull from this new personal draw pile into my hand. And so I'm going to draw 1 and 2, and let's see what I got back. All right, so I now have my Indian Trader and my Priest card back in my active hand. So the active hand can never be more than 7 cards, and this simulates the idea that at this time, of course, traveling in canoes, there were limited resources available at any stop along a river. And so the most that you can have in your active hand is 7 allies and resource cards at a time. Okay, so managing your hand is a really important part of Runners of the Woods. Okay, a couple of things on the map here before we finish. You'll see that another option is to land on a red junction, and generally you continue to move upriver until you reach the end of a river system, which allows you then to return going downstream. Okay, so you're always continuing to move one way. You can't, for instance, say, oh, I've moved one direction upstream, now I'm going back to make a trade. Okay, that's just not how it works, because then you could just be making trades all the time. Instead, you've got to keep on moving along a river system until you reach the end of it, in which case then you can go back down river and hit all those spots as you go. Fast travel, that is done by way of provisions. If you have a provisions card and you play it, you can move then 2 spots on the map. Or if you have 2 provisions cards, you can move 3 spots on the map. Okay, so you might end up at a red dot. That simply allows you to manage your hand and to make attacks against other players. If you end up at a teepee sign, which is an Indian village, that is where you can look over in the community cards here and find a provision card. And you'll see those as you go through. It's a white bag that is meant to have pemmican and food and other things like that. Okay? So those provision cards allow you to make more than a single move on the map in a turn. Now, these Indian villages are interesting too, because if you begin your turn at 1 and you happen to have 2 Indian cards in your active hand, you can play both of them, which allows you to fast travel. And that would take you from one Indian village immediately to another one, as you saw me move there. Okay? I just realized that the screen was not showing every move that I was doing here. Okay, so I'll just do that again. So here we are at the trading post. Okay, and we make a move to a spot that has pelts available. You can see the red dots. Okay, and then also here is the Indian village that I was at. And if I play 2 Indian cards, I can, in one move all the way to an Indian village. If I am headed back down river and there are no more Indian villages between myself and the trading post, 2 Indian cards can take me right to the trading post where I can make that trade, giving me money and victory points and the ability then to move towards beating the other Courrier de Bois. Okay? That is a nice introduction just to how to set up the game. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You'll find that on the bottom of your instructions. Thank you very much for your interest in Runners of the Woods.